Hello, everyone. It's Joe Polish.
And this is Dan Sullivan.
And here we are, 10X Talk. And we just got done with a wonderful Genius Network 25K meeting. And Dan, you're back in, where are you at right now? You in Toronto or Chicago right now?
No, I'm in Toronto, yeah. I came back. Fahrenheit, there was like a 65-degree difference leaving Phoenix and getting back to Toronto. So, it's always bracing living in a four-season climate, and we've just had a wonderfully bracing winter in Toronto. So anyway, but I love it. I love the change, and changes of all kind. Climate's one of them. Or, as I should say, weather. Shouldn't be talking about climate change. It's weather change. So,
right. That's funny. So something happened before, during, and after the 25K meeting, and you are a very unique individual. And I've, of course, have said that for years. I mean, I think even the creation of 10X Talk is a byproduct of capturing the ideas, the philosophies, the strategies, the methods, the thinking of great thinking and how it's applied in a way to help a person grow a company 10 times. And so you showed up for Genius Network and you actually created two impact filters. And an impact filter is a tool that you use in Strategic Coach. You actually teach Strategic Coach clients, multipliers, how to actually use this tool to think. And you created a couple of them. One of them had to do with things that you're grateful for your participation in Genius Network. And then another one, which we're going to talk about on today's episode, which is creating 8 things to be grateful for my 2 days of Genius Network that you just came back from. And from my perspective, you're literally laying out all of the things that you got out of the meeting that you're grateful for that made it successful. But there's a big lesson in this for people listening of how Dan squeezes the most juice out of your experiences. I've always loved the saying, is the juice worth the squeeze? And you just know how to squeeze really well. But you also know how to pick out things that are worth squeezing, because you can't manufacture value out of environments or things, or books, courses, trainings, events, meetings where there is none. But when there is value, you just have a really unique and I think very useful way of making sure you get value and that you also communicate it to, in my particular case here, me. So I'd love to have you create some context about what we're going to talk about, and let's go through it because I think it's awesome.
Well, this particular meeting was the 4th anniversary since I started 25K. And along the way, I keep working to make each of the meetings more valuable. And I just go back to the original thing that you said when I first walked in the room back 4 years ago, and you said, look, everybody in the room here is paying me $25,000 per year to be in this particular experience. And I just want to tell you, if you can't turn at least one idea that you get during the next year into a $250,000 return, I don't really want you back for the second year. And, I take that seriously because I run my own coaching program, and I'm trying to get across to people that if you consider something a cost, then you'll be lucky to get your money back. But if you consider something an investment, then you can get a multiple. You can actually get an exponential back. So first of all, Joe, I think there's just a mindset of not treating anything in your life as a cost, but just treating it as an investment. You can make bad investments and you want to get out of them as fast as you can. But if you treat an experience like 25K, not that you're paying $25,000, but you're investing time and you're investing energy, but most of all, you're investing your intelligence. So what I came into this meeting with was a specific goal that I was going to get 8 specific things out of it that were going to be able to be multiplied more than 10 times. And so I sent you a thank you note, really, about what had happened last Thursday and Friday. I mean, we're sitting here a couple of days away from that, and I just wanted to communicate to this. And I knew we had this recording coming up, so I just wanted to make this one of the subjects of the current one that we're actually doing right now. And I'd like to talk people through it because I'm a big promoter of 25K, but lots of times it's, if you're away from the meeting a month or two, people say, well, what actually goes on in the meeting? And what do you get out of it? It's a little harder to say, but since I'm so close and I had a specific strategy there, I'd like to just spend about 15 or 20 minutes just going through point by point of my 8 takeaways to actually express the value that I see out of this, and perhaps to role model how other people could approach 25K, but approach almost anything that they do in life.
Yeah. And that's the thinking I want to really capture here too, because I learned so much. I mean, when I saw you do this, when I got this, it made me think, wow, I mean, think about all the applications in different areas of my life that this sort of thinking can be applied to, so that, I could really go into everything, every experience, and have a much different, much deeper, more valuable experience, and a much greater awareness of what to pull out of and where to place my energies, because it's just how much do you actually get out of something has everything to do with where your mind is at. And you made that statement to me before we started recording, your eyes only see and your ears only hear what they're looking for.
What your brain is looking for.
Yeah.
You got to tell your brain up front what to look for, any experience that you go into. Your brain will look for anything. It doesn't really care. It just wants to be busy with something. So you better tell your brain what you want it to be busy about, There's an old saying that nobody ever got seduced who wasn't looking for sex. People say, I was seduced. You weren't seduced. You were actually looking for it. You just, nobody gets seduced if their brain didn't already set up the possibilities. So
that is funny.
No, it is. I mean, people are always saying, well, this happened to me. And I says, well, why'd you write the program that way? I mean, would you set up the program to have that bad thing happen to you?
Right. Yep.
So I just try to program my brain to have only good things happen to me. And one of the things is the impact filter is this tool from Strategic Coach that we use. It kind of tells you, these are my checkoff points. By the time I'm finished on Friday night in Phoenix at the end of 2 days of 25K, I'm going to have 8 boxes filled in here. And then during the course of the 2 days, I actually had about 15 candidates that I could have written down, and these were the finalists. And I mean, they're terrific. So I'd just like to go through one of them, Joe, and just, first of all, you had a real champion there, and that was Paris. He's got a long name.
Lampropolis. He's got the craziest name.
Lampropolis, yeah, Paris, who's both in Strategic Coach. In your experience, Joe, I know you've had some phenomenal writers in your network of great marketers, but Paris is right there at the top, isn't he?
Yeah, totally. He's one of the greatest copywriters in the world. He's written campaigns and promotions that have, brought in, sure, in the billions of dollars range. Mm-hmm. And he's just a really smart guy who has spent most of his adult life understanding how to enter a conversation that's existing in the person's mind that he's writing to. And he's a student of marketing, of words, of copy, of psychology, and knowing how to apply it with persuasive, compelling language.
Well, the first one that I was really grateful for, it was a conversation between Paris and Richard Rossi, who's a great friend of ours, and he has this great new company called Future Docs, where he introduces young people to a career either as a physician or a medical scientist. And Richard is just an amazing direct mail marketer. But the idea was that if you're going to start a business initiative, so we got a lot of people out there who are involved in business initiatives, Joe, and what Richard said, before you do anything, write a great sales letter on what the value creation proposition is for someone who's actually going to use the services or the products of the business, and don't do anything else until you got a great sales letter. And I said, what an amazing, simple way to think about business development is that you show it to people and they said, this is just an amazing sales letter. I would buy this. And then you form your company to fulfill the promise of the letter. And I just said, that is so amazing, because oftentimes people will create everything before they get around to saying, well, how are we going to sell this?
Right.
We only have one company, but we introduce new projects and we introduce new programs inside Strategic Coach. So I said, before we do anything, we're going to write the sales letter for the new initiative. So with each one of these, I said, what's the potential value of this one idea? And I put down $1 million plus. that if starting right now in 2014 and going forward into the future in Strategic Coach, that before we do anything, we always write the sales letter first. I said that'll be worth $1 million to us, and that would be in a fairly short period of time because we bring in some big numbers inside our programs.
Right. And the other thing, too, is not only is the smartest way to start anything because it gets you completely in tune with not only what it is you're selling and why someone should buy it, could buy it, would buy it, but it also can save you an enormous amount of unnecessary spinning of the wheels and attempting to go down a path offering something that nobody's going to buy. And if you put your focus and emphasis on the sales letter, which could also be a video, which could also be an audio, it doesn't always need to be paper and ink, but it's really words. It's the message.
Yeah.
I believe it really should start in print,
yes,
handwritten or typed. I mean, even handwritten, which is a whole nother issue that I know you're going to speak to.
Yes.
But when you do that, you really get out of your own head and your own ego thinking about what you sell, and you have to start thinking about what's in it for the person that's going to buy it. And if you understand the mindset of the person that you're actually selling something to, and you can weave that into your initial sales letter. And so if someone's never written before and they're brand new to marketing and they don't feel like they can writing to sell versus writing to teach are two different types of writing styles. Yeah. And you've said this many times, Dan, that your number one job as an entrepreneur in the beginning is to go out and get checks. I mean, you have to sell. Mm-hmm. Everybody needs to do this, has to do it if they're ever going to have a successful company. So you have a great advantage being the founder of a particular company or being a believer of an idea where you're building a company around it, which is nobody knows and understands what it is you're selling at the level that you do. And even if they do understand it, your commitment to it because you started a company built around it is huge. So a lot of people don't even give themselves credit and they think they can't write something. It's like, well, it's your company. I mean, you started it. It's your blood, sweat, and tears that you're putting into it. Sit down and put that on paper. Write down, why does it matter? Who cares? Why should someone care? And if you get that down first, I've seen people. Let me just make this point, then I'll let you continue on with the other points. There's a famous, old school copywriter and marketer by the name of Ted Nicholas. I interviewed him years ago, and he had sold over $200 million worth of information products. And I remember when I was talking with Ted, he said that he would spend sometimes 10 to 20 times the amount of time writing a one-page ad for a 200 or 300-page manual that he had written than he spent writing the 200 or 300-page manual.
Oh, yes.
Because he needed to get the sales promotion right. And he also had another rule in his company where if someone was to bring him an idea, he said, don't bring me an idea, bring me an ad.
Yes.
Because if you're going to try to sell me on an idea, write the promotion for it. Because if you can't convince me that we should implement or start this new thing and you can't write an ad that convinces me, then what are our likelihood that we're ever going to be able to sell the idea to someone else? But if you actually write the promotion first and you bring it to me and it sells me on it, then we may have already simultaneously created what we're going to need to sell it to other people. And I just thought it was a great idea. Don't bring me ideas, bring me promotions. And you do the same thing with your tools, with impact filters, with strategy circles. I mean, you already do this and you train people and coach how to do this. So.
Well, I mean, each impact filter could very easily become a sales letter. Last year I did 368 impact filters on just anything I wanted done in the company. But just along the lines, because you brought it up, how do you become a good writer? And this was one of Paris's ideas. And he said, if you come across a piece of copy that you think is just really, really great, get that piece of copy, put it on the table in front of you, get out a sheet of paper, and with your pen, word by word, go through and actually, in your handwriting, copy out what's great. And he said, if you have a really great ad and you write it out 10 times, and let's say you do it once a day for 10 days, he said, at the end of 10 days, your writing ability will have improved immensely because your brain really, really takes seriously what you write. There's a real power and connection between your writing hand and your brain, which is proven neurologically. There's a lot of proof about the immense importance of writing, not with a keyboard, but with your hand. So I immediately, and I said, well, who's the greatest copywriter I've ever met? And I said, well, it's William Shakespeare. I think Shakespeare is the smartest human being who ever existed. He wrote this 400 years ago, and every idea is as clear today as it was back then. And what's amazing about him, he tends to use just one-syllable words. If you get 20 Shakespeare words, 15 of them will just be one syllable. He doesn't use big words. And so there's a very famous speech out of Shakespeare from the play Henry V. It's called the St. Crispin's Day speech. And that's the king exhorting his troops to fight a really great battle, which they won. But it's very short. Really, you can write it on one page. And I just started writing it, and I've been writing it for 3 days now. And I'm just amazed that when I sit down to write something, how simpler my speech has become. I've just decided, for as long as I can into the future, every day I'm going to take a piece of Shakespeare and I'm going to write it out by hand and just watch the impact that it has on my brain. And since I'm one of the main writers, Joe, in the company, you know that I can really, something I believe in, I can really write a great sales letter for you or for Peter or for other people. So I just want to have the genius of William Shakespeare kind of taking over my writing style. But it's not just his writing style, it's actually his way of thinking his way through a sale, because virtually everything Shakespeare is doing is he's selling something, and you can really see the sale. So that's easily $1 million idea. So here I am, I paid $25,000 to be in your workshop, but already, this happened in the first morning. This happened like in the first 2 hours. And I said, bingo, bingo. I got 2 of them, and I'm just sitting there and I'm just, I've got a cash register. I said, there's $1 million, there's $1 million.
That's great.
And that's just how I approach it. I mean, the 25,000 is just a token of membership. It doesn't mean anything. The value is so great. And here again is that I'm bringing a certain attitude to the experience.
Right. You are. I love that. You're bringing a certain attitude to the experience. And when someone can sit in the same room and experience something completely different, is it because of what's being shared, or is it because of their listening, or is it because of their attitude? I mean, it's probably a combination of things, but the attitude has everything to do with it. So, continue on.
Yeah, the next one, and this is Joel Weldon, who is such a treat. Just for those who are listening, Joe brought in an impact coach, and Joel is 72 years old, lives in the Phoenix area, has been associated with main platform speaking for half a century. And this man probably had more impact on my thinking about how I present myself in public than anyone else in 40 years. And I sent him a note. I actually told him, I says, Joel, I have to tell you, just what I've learned from the last 2 days is greater in terms of my thinking than anything I've experienced in the last 40 years. And about 15 minutes, he came up and he had it all written out. And he says, is that what you said? And I said, yes, it is what I said. And he said, can I use it? And I said, absolutely, you can use it. But he just talked a little bit about some of his philosophy of life. And one of them, that when he engages anyone like a contractor, anybody who's going to do something for him, at a certain point, they're going to name their price. And Joel's response is, I won't pay it. And the person, is a little bit taken back and says, you won't pay it? And he says, no, unless you charge me 10% more. And, it leads to a conversation. And the person says, well, why should I charge you 10% more? And he says, because then you'll own it. And he says, if you just do it for your price, you might bump me for somebody else in front of the line. But if I pay you 10% more, you'll really own the project. And he says that whenever he does this, and he does it consistently, he always says that the person knocks himself out. And part of the reason, I think, isn't so much for the 10% extra money, it's just the recognition. You're sending a message right up front. Look, I'm willing to pay more than your asking price, but I'm not paying for any greater skill. I'm just paying for greater dedication and greater seriousness about what you're going to do. And he says it works like a charm. And I said, boy, how many people out there have hired somebody, and then it took 3 times longer than it was supposed to take, and there were always delays because they were competing with everybody else in this person's life. Whereas if you just say up front, look, I'm going to pay you 10% more, immediately you go to the front of the line. I'm just thinking about the natural tendencies. But it was funny when I talked to Joel because I signed up for his coaching program, and I think it's going to be one of the best investments that I make. And he named the price, and I said, I actually want to give you twice as much because I've already got that much value just from talking to you. And he said, no, it's it's the price. And I said, Joel, you got to be consistent here.
That is funny as hell.
Yeah, well, it is. And I would have. I got more than his asking price just from interacting for 2 days, but I just found it really funny. Maybe I should have just said, I'll give you 10% more. Maybe it doesn't.
Right. Maybe he wouldn't have been so freaked out.
Maybe double doesn't work for his system. But just think about that, Joel. You're involved in a big construction project. I'm involved in a really big construction project. There's probably going to be about 10 or 15 opportunities to do this. And I'm just really thinking about it in terms of adapting this as a policy of saying, whatever your asking price is, I'm going to pay you 10% more, but I want you to pour yourself into this with total dedication.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you say, Dan, about don't treat anything as a cost but as an investment. And until you can flip that switch in your mind, people would have a hard time because all they're going to see is they're going to spend 10% more versus they're going to get a much greater investment, because the way that you expressed it here on the impact filter was the strategy of paying everyone who works for us 10% more than the asking price, and you put in parentheses 10 times greater quality.
Yeah.
And it's just your way of assuring and creating a mechanism where people just put more of themselves into it, because when you appreciate people at a level greater than everything that their quote unquote price is rewarding them financially for, it's totally a game changer. What happens is it's not the money, although that's the mechanism that flips the switch. What happens is all of a sudden the appreciation goes up. So the appreciation of a relationship is far greater when you express that. It's just a greater way of saying thank you in advance to assure that people are going to treat it like their own.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is I go to a tailor, that I've talked to you about a lot here in the city, a guy named Harry Rosen, who's one of the great tailors in the world. And, I've been going for about 10 years, and they have a record of all my purchases. And one day, it wasn't Harry, but it was one of the salespeople there, said, I just noticed something. You never buy anything on sale here. We've got some great sales here. And I said, yes, you do. And they said, you can get 40% off on really top-notch stuff. And I said, something? I wouldn't feel good about wearing it. And the reason I wouldn't feel good about wearing it is that great craftsmanship went into this, great fabrics went into this. It's beautiful design. Why shouldn't I pay full price for this? And he said, if all our customers were like you, we wouldn't have to have any sales. And I said, yeah, but I said, I've never discounted in my life. The only time my sales team came and asked me if I was going to discount was during a downturn. And I said to them, no, I wouldn't discount, but I might double the price because I have a feeling there's some people out there waiting to pay me twice as much as I'm charging right now, So this whole pricing thing and quality is a very, very interesting psychological game. And it's very much bound up in what we've been talking about throughout this entire series, Joe, about what is 10 times thinking. Well, the first thing is you just eliminate completely the whole concept of cost. And I think that's the doorway that gets you into 10 times thinking. If you're thinking cost, you're never going to get anywhere near 10 times thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that is the big lesson for one of them for this episode.
I'm just going to finish off with another one of Paris's great lines, and this has to do with copywriting. And he said, when you're writing, write about actions, don't write about abstractions. And, Joe, we've often talked about the difference between the world of the entrepreneur in the marketplace and the world of the academic or the intellectual. And intellectuals write in abstractions, and entrepreneurs, the really good entrepreneurs write in actions. And human beings really, really relate to actions. They don't really relate to abstractions. So an abstraction is kind of like an idea, and usually an abstraction is always expressed in a word that has 4 syllables, and actions usually are not more than 1 syllable, 1 or 2 syllables. I just thought about it, and I said, I was watching Paris as he interacted during the 2 days, and I said, Malcolm Gladwell has this great book. I think it's Blink, and he talks about the 10,000 hours, that when you put in 10,000 hours of something you're really great at, you begin thinking very, very simply. And I said, Paris, you probably put in 30 or 40,000 hours, but just saying, write to actions, don't write to abstractions. And I said, I'm writing a book right now, and I went back and looked at a whole section of copy that I had written. I had about 5 or 6 abstractions in there, and I just got rid of them. I just found an action word, and immediately the copy popped off the page. Well, again, that's me as a writer. I have 5 writers who are in Coach, in our company here. And I said, look, this is going to be a rule. Just don't talk about abstractions. Just find an action way of expressing everything. I said, what's that worth from a sales standpoint? What's that worth from a coach standpoint? If you project it over 10 years or 25 years of Coach, what's the value of that? And I said, well, that's easily $1 million. So I just went through this, and the general principle here isn't so much what my specifics are, but I think we had to talk about them just so people have an idea what I'm talking about. But I think the big thing here is that, one, if you're going into an experience, set out a strategy of 8 things or 5 things, whatever the number is, that you want to get out of the experience so that you're actually getting a return on investment. You're not sitting there saying, was it worth the cost? Shifting away of anything that you pay for in life, stop thinking about it as a cost. Think about it as an investment. And then when someone's doing something for you, if you add 10%, you change totally. You transform the quality of the relationship just by doing that right up front. So there's so many wonderful lessons that came out for me. And I was going to ask you a question just to finish off. You received this afternoon before we were going into the recording studio. What was it like for you to get the impact filter where I said, Joe, these are the 8 things, and I'm very grateful that I got them out of 25K?
Well, it was immediate gratitude, since what you expressed was gratitude. And when you give gratitude, it's like a boomerang. It comes back. And I immediately saw how you interpreted and experienced my 25K meeting. So I felt acknowledged. I felt edified. I felt awesome. I was like, wow, you not only expressed appreciation and what you get out of something, and how important utilizing what it is that I offer is to me. It's an important aspect of why I do what it is I do. I want people to use it. And it gave me a whole criteria of what you're getting out of it. And you are what I would consider the ideal person that I want in 25K. A person who takes it seriously, a person that utilizes it, a person that refers other people into my program. I mean, you're not just one of my closest relationships and friends. I mean, you're my coach. Getting this from you, I mean, it's like golden. I almost have to pinch myself when I see stuff like this. It's like, wow, Dan took the time to write this out, which is great for me, but here's what he's getting out of it simultaneously. I was like, wow. And it just makes me better, and it allows me to see the value that 25K is providing. And I think if all humans operated this way, anyone listening, if they did the same sort of thing with any sort of experience, it would make the experience greater for them. And I know one of the reasons you do this. I mean, it solidifies what it is that you do. I mean, if there's one thing by observing you that I've watched, part of your ability to go back to my juice analogy is that you actually take the time to recount your experience, to really slow down. See, a lot of people think, well, I'm going to run from book to book, seminar to seminar, meeting to meeting, and I'm not even going to think about it before. I'm not going to think about it after. And I mean, you approach life with a tremendous amount of thinking before you go into something. You go into it, and because you did the thinking prior to it, you get a heck of a lot more out of it than most people, and then you recount it afterwards, and so you capture, the action steps, and you just know how to plow a field of experiences better than anyone I know, and that's why I think so many people want the life that you live. I mean, you have this great 4 seasons life because you're so damn clear on how to set it up. and you have all these conditions. I mean, I think one of the biggest reasons, people join Strategic Coach, stay in Strategic Coach, is they just admire the way that you live. But here you are is laying out the blueprint of what you do and how to do it. So, I mean, if someone reads between the lines here, which isn't really all that sneaky, I mean, you're kind of laying out what you do and how you do it. So when I got it, I just felt awesome. So much so that, we're talking about it here on an episode and, wanting to share this with other people so that hopefully they can take the same thing, which is why I think on the next episode, I think we should continue on with this, because what I would like to say to everybody listening is, if you just take this episode, be it the idea of starting every business initiative with a sales letter, writing by hand, great writing so it integrates it into your thinking, paying someone 10% more, speaking in actions, not extractions. If you just take those concepts and say, okay, how am I going to apply that? What am I going to do with this? And you stop for, 2 or 3 minutes and jot down, what are some actions and some applications of this? Guess what? This time you just spent listening to me and Dan will be incredibly valuable. But if you just listen to this and all right, off to the next thing, you're going to get that out of it.
In all of these 10 times talk things, we're getting down to some fairly fundamental concepts about, look, it's your experience. You're the only one responsible for it. You get a lot of it. I mean, if you live a long life, you get a lot of experience, but is any of it of any value, And my feeling is that you can literally take any experience in your life, set it up properly, and it can be almost like going to a school. I mean, quite frankly, I had school years in grade school where I got more out of your 2 days than I got out of 9 months of sitting in a classroom, But the difference is who I've become since I was 8 years old. I just realized that it's not up to anyone else to make my life meaningful. It's not up to anyone else to make my life interesting. It's my deal, and I have to learn certain skills and set up certain structures to have a life that really has purpose and meaning to it. And, these tools like Impact Filter are some of the means by which I've trained myself and introduce the whole concept to other people. So it's great talk. And I think, Joe, one of the things that would lend itself to another podcast here is maybe the reverse of this. What are the attitudes that people have which are the reverse of what we're talking about here, where people cut themselves off from actually getting value? And that might be a very useful topic in a future recording.
Yeah, I agree. Love it. So thank you, Dan. And so for everyone listening to this, I want to do a shout out because I'm starting to get messages on Facebook, and I've had a couple of cards that have been sent into my office saying that you listen to every episode of 10X Talk that I do with Dan, and we appreciate the people that have started with us from the very beginning that are sharing this. There's several people even from other parts of the world that listen to every episode and are sharing them on Facebook and different social media. So I want to just thank all those people and know that we really appreciate it. That's one of the reasons we're doing this. And some of you we may never meet in person, but the fact that we're able to reach you and share this with you and help you in your businesses and your thinking makes both me and Dan feel great. And so I want to thank you for that, and give us your comments on 10xtalk.com. And until the next episode, have an awesome day, awesome week, and we'll talk to you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.